Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of AgogeTV. This is episode number 31. I'm your host, Phil Leonard.
I'm your host, Josh Summersgill.
On today's podcast, we have my coach, Brannen Dorman. Brannen's a member of the training think tank team, coaches for TTT, as most people will know them. He's responsible for coaching at all levels, from elite all the way down to me. Brannen also
get out of here with that self-deprecation.
I was like, if I start firing shots at myself first, I feel
defense mechanism there straight away.
So basically, I'm going to pass it over to Brannen to explain a bit more about himself. I know he's started a career started out in American football before coming over to us CrossFitters. Brannen, if I pass it over to you, and you can explain how you got from American football, what you did in American football, and probably just football to you, isn't it? Everyone else will be like, what?
If I just say football, is that okay?
Yeah,
it's funny because with all of my international clients, I always try to say American football. Like I was just talking to somebody over in Asia the other day, and I said football to them, and I have no idea if they even understood what I was talking about. I'm like, no, I just need to say American football. Maybe send some pictures or something. Yeah, so I mean, you know, in the United States, obviously football's big. Grew up loving it, so that's kind of where I got into training, which is kind of an easy in because everyone here that's playing is doing a lot of that, right? Like strength and conditioning is huge in the sport, just because you have to be bigger, stronger, faster than the other guy. So I got into it at an early age, just training, and I loved it. And then obviously kind of growing up and going from, you know, what we call middle school age, which is like 12 and 13, into high school here, which was like, you know, 16 to 18. And then I played in college. The strength and conditioning was like more and more developed, more and more complex. And I kind of fell in love with that. So when I went to college, I was like, this is something that I want to do, right? And I got involved with actually an organization over here called FCA, which basically it's a Christian organization that runs football camps. And it was really awesome because I got to meet a lot of strength and conditioning coaches in the Chicago area, which is obviously a huge area for football and just a big metropolitan area. And then I started running those camps myself my senior year of college, which allowed me to like work with 250 high school age kids and just like prep them for football. And so that was when I was like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So out of college, I was able to get a job as a strength and conditioning coach in a small private school in Florida, which is where I grew up. So I was lucky enough to go back to where I grew up, a couple hours away from where my family lived. It was a perfect situation because I was able to see them, but at the same time, have a job and kind of be off on my own. And through just kind of the connections that I made down there, I actually met a friend who was a former American football player in the NFL, which is obviously kind of the biggest stage. And it was cool because it went from like, you know, me kind of doing everything on my own to now having this business partner that could kind of back all the vision that I had to build a facility and all the other things that I wanted to do. And so we partnered up, and I'm telling this story for a reason because it's kind of how I kind of training think tank, right? Yeah. When we partnered up, we built out this facility. Well, at the same time that where it's just a sports performance facility, at the same time, CrossFit's really blowing up. So I said, we need to tap into that market. And I loved watching, like I was watching the games, watching Rich Froning at the time. That's when he like fell off the ropes, you know, that whatever year that was, 2011, 2012. And so we opened up a CrossFit facility at the same time that we opened up that, basically just a small space. Well, during that same time, another gym down the road, they sold, and the business owner came over to our gym, and I became friends with him. And that business owner happened to be best friends with Max, who is the owner of Training Think Tank. Right. And Max used to live down in that area. So he said, you need to meet this guy, Max. Like, you've got to meet him. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. You know, like I'm focused on the business. Like it doesn't matter to me at the time. And so like he was gone for a month or so, came back in, and we did a workout together. He hung out with us, and he's like, you've got to meet Max. I'm like, you've been telling me like I got to meet this guy, but I don't care. So eventually, after like 2 or 3 months of prodding me, I got on a phone call with Max and just like fell in love with him. Literally, like if you guys ever get a chance to talk to him, obviously he's an awesome dude. He knows what he's doing, and he's created a very successful business model. And so after meeting him, within a couple of months, I came on with Training Think Tank and was working remotely in Boca Raton, Florida. Max at the time was in Utah. And then he called me one day and said, hey, look, I want to build my own facility out in Atlanta, Georgia. Are you willing to move up? And that was a no-brainer for me. It was, you know, one of those things where it's like, this is a dream come true. And basically sold off my part of the business in Boca Raton, moved up and became a coach for Training Think Tank. And that was almost 6 years ago now.
Oh, awesome. Big move though. So
Yeah.
was there any nerves around that? Was it, in fact, sorry, first thing, let's go back just so other people know, because people listening to the podcast might not know. Max is the owner of Training Think Tank, but he's also Noah Elson, Will Morad, and Travis Mayer's coach. And if you don't know who they are, stop listening, go away. Enough of that. No, they're all so they're all games athletes, and he pretty much solely coaches games athletes now.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically what we've done is he's focused most of his time now on business development, and he still has his few athletes that he's working with, and he works with them full time. But as we've kind of made the transition to more coaches, and like we've grown the design, which is our online training program. We have the classroom, which is our like our Netflix of education, our online educational program. We have the podcast series that we just came out with. We have we're doing a new social media push. So we have all these session videos and everything else, so people can check all that out. But like, he's kind of trying to oversee that more. And, you know, the other coaches, so people like me or Kyle Ruth or, you know, Mike McGoldrick, Becky, Adam, all the coaches are the ones that are doing most of the athlete work.
Oh, amazing. And so you basically uprooted and moved to training to be full-time with the Training Think Tank. Is that like a scary move? Was there anything that sort of made you go, wow, hang on, I'm not sure whether this is for me? Or was it just literally like, yeah, I'm in, and literally pack your bags and off you went?
Yeah, well, it definitely was what I wanted to do. So I think in that regard, it wasn't scary. But I think any move where finances are uncertain, whether people say it or not, is always scary, right? Because like, you just never know. Like, Training Think Tank at the time was still a small business. Like, Max was thriving with the athletes that he had, but it wasn't like, hey, I've got 40 athletes for you to take on right away. It was like, hey, you have to grow your own business. And so I had already grown this business that was relatively successful. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, we were making tons of money or something like that. So I don't want to say it was just like, I'm just giving this up to go somewhere else. But I mean, there was a lot of sweat and tears that went into the sports performance facility we had in Boca Raton. But to me, what the vision that Max had and what he sold was so obvious what I wanted to be a part of, that it made it easy for me to make that move. And then it was just like, okay, now how do I, and I wanted to be uncomfortable, but how do I make myself a business here? And how do I make myself a part of Training Think Tank that's so valuable that like I have to be a part of it for the long term, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. And I remember when we first started talking about me coming on as a client, you sort of explained your role within Training Think Tank. Do you mind just like sort of running through like, so just if I break down the way I look at Training Think Tank, you see Evan, who's for lack of better terms, just the biggest geek in the world.
That's accurate.
But he's a full-on genius, but like,
he is.
And then you've got Kyle, who very much I think he brings yours and Evan's world together. So what's your whole sort of like role in sort of the Training Think Tank? How do you sort of manage each other? Because you're all very, very different, which is cool.
Yeah, and for those listening, I think that's kind of part of the point of the group of people that we have is we try to create as diverse a community as possible, right? We need the people like Evan, who, I mean, he literally is a genius. He's so brilliant, and he is the guy that does all of our research. He's the guy that when we do our staff meetings, if there's new stuff that comes out, he's explaining it to us. Because like, for me, I would say that I'm pretty much caught up on what's going on right now, but there's so many things that, and I'm fine with saying this, that I don't understand. I'm like, Evan, what does this mean? Like, how do we apply this to training principles? And he's the guy that can do that. And, you know, Kyle is probably the one that's most gifted at being in the middle of that. Like, he's more understanding of the science and the principles that go behind that, the bedrock of all of the things that we do. But he also has coached enough athletes and understands how to take those, you know, principles, whatever you want to call them, the science behind the training into like the real world, because that's a hard transition. There are coaches that know the science but don't know the people, and there are people that know the people but don't know the science, and you got to find the middle ground. And so I think I'm probably more towards just because of my athletic development career, and we can get into like the stats and the data, I'm more of an analytics guy. I'm more of a, hey, you need to go out there and practice the sport, and you need to look at it and see what's tested most, see how the combos are tested, see where the limitations actually are in a performance setting, because that is most important in the sport, not just building up your physiology. And not to say that that's not important. That is again, the bedrock of everything that we do. But the best of the best in the sport are all very similar. So then it's like, how do we get Noah to be better than Fraser? Because believe it or not, I mean, their physiological metrics aren't that much different, right? And in fact, Noah's probably more gifted in some areas, and obviously Matt's gifted in others, but Matt wins every time. Why is that? And a lot of that's just on the floor performance. And it's the same thing in every sport, not to keep rambling here, but if you look at all the other sports in the world, most people have very similar talent levels, but it's like, what makes this guy or this girl a little bit better than the others? And there's those psychological factors and just the ability to compete. And so that's what I want to look at too with my high level performers. But not only there, like, how do I look at that with the people that just want to complete the 5K, or the person that just wants to be able to go to their local competition or compete in their box or whatever it may be? Like, there are always things that we can look at on the competitive side to get them better. And it's not just the physiological side.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you mentioned the stats and figures, which is something I did want to ask you about, because I feel like you've compiled such a massive database of stats and figures for CrossFit. Like, you reeled off stuff speaking to me, and I've said some things on other podcasts and things that you've done, where you're like, yeah, so you just need to do burpees at like 2.2 burpees per second because that, and like, where did you even start to like accumulate that data? Because I wouldn't even know where to begin. And like, let's say you've got everything, and I believe you've got an EMOM as well, haven't you? Which is an indicator of.
We have so many tests. So I mean that there's to answer that first question, and then we can kind of dive into kind of how all this works. Basically what we did is we went back to the start of CrossFit when they actually started competitively scoring the open, the old school, what was called sectionals before sanctionals and regionals, right? All of that. And then all of the games performances. And we've taken every single data point and we put it into a spreadsheet. So I say I did that, and then kind of had Kyle Ruth and some other people help me analyze some of the data to find the correlators and what things were comboed and stuff like that. And basically what I did is I just created this year by year. So 2011, 2012, 2013, what was the most commonly tested movements? What movements were most commonly paired together? What movements were most commonly repped out over certain rep ranges? What were the time domains? You know, on and on and on and on and on, right? And then from there, we can compile all the years. So now that we have 11 years of data, we can look at what are the trends in the sport? What things have been tested most over the 11 years? What things have been tested more often over the last few years? What things were tested back in the day that aren't anymore? So on and so forth. And what that allows us to do. So I think to kind of start all of this, and I don't know if you want me to ramble or not, but I think this is
important. Go for it. Keep going.
Okay, cool.
We're having about us.
So when someone, and this is true again of like someone that just wants to compete in their box or someone that wants to make the games, but let's just talk about someone that wants to make the games because it's a little bit easier because we can actually talk about the high level data points, right? Someone comes on and says, I want to make the games. That's their goal. So that's obviously the first step is we got to know like what someone's goal is. So again, if it's, I want to make the games, or if I want to just like actually run a 5K and not stop, like we know that the goal is there. Okay. Now we got to know, how do we do that for the 5K and not stop? That's a little bit easier. Like we know that they just have to run the whole time for, 5,000 meters, right? For the games, obviously the hard part about this sport is there are so many things that are tested and there are so many combos that are tested. And the reality is that new things do pop up. So from there, I think what used to happen is we would just look at what we thought were limitations and we assumed that those are the things that athlete needs to get better at. So you hear the thing all the time in the strength and conditioning world, we need to assess, not guess, right? And that's very much true. I assess all of my athletes. How do they move? What are they most efficient in? What are they inefficient in as far as like the basic patterns in the sport? But we also need to assess what they actually need to get better at based on what's tested in the sport. So in other words, I think in the past, what we've done as coaches is, well, this other games athlete can do 25 unbroken muscle ups, so they should probably be able to do 25 unbroken muscle ups. But that has no correlator to who makes the games, right? Whereas if we look at the real data, we can actually say, what do they need to do with their muscle ups in a tested setting at a regionals or now at a sanctionals or to qualify for the games or in the open? So then I can actually say, is that something that's worth working on? So in other words, I can look at all the limitations and strengths and pick out the things that need to be driven up the most first. Because when we're looking at the sport, it's a sport of averages, right? It's not about being the best at everything. Like even Fraser's not the best at everything. Obviously, he's gotten to the point where he's in the top 5 almost in every category, and that's why he wins. But like, think about Froning or even think about Fraser this past year, they had bottom 5 finishes. Fraser almost lost the games to Noah last year because he bombed the sprint event and he had another mistake in one of the other earlier events. That's on him. That's not on anybody else. If people can complain, Vellner complained, Bukowski, and this is not me calling them out, right? It's just like there were events that they weren't good at. And so what they should be doing is going back and looking and saying, I need to get better at this. And I can guarantee you one thing, Fraser's going to come back if they have the games this year, and he's going to be good at the sprint event because he's not going to finish 20th out of 20 in the sprint event again, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. And so we're looking at all of these averages, and we just need to say, hey, we can't have that last place finish. We just need to be 15th place, because if, like for Noah, for example, he's usually second place, third place, 8th place, 5th place, but then he usually has that one that's 35th place. And in the games, you're only getting 5 points for that. And that really, really hurts. So when we're looking at the averages, it's like, we just need to drive these things up. But when we look at that, okay, so based on these averages, what are the things that are going to come up most often? And so here's like a really simple example. And me and Kyle Ruth have had some arguments on this, so hopefully he doesn't watch it and and get mad at me. So Kyle Ruth comes from...
So it's okay, we can back you up. We got you.
Yeah. He comes from a swimming background, which I love, and I think it's extremely important in the sport. I obviously don't come from a swimming background. I personally don't like to swim, and I have my own biases. So I agree. I understand when people say, well, you're just biased because you like to run. I get that. But based on the data, at the games, on average, there are 4 running events every single year. On average, there's only 1 swimming event every single year. In sanctionals this past year, running was tested at least once and most often 1.5 times per event at sanctionals. Swimming was only tested 5 times in all of the sanctionals. So in other words, 4% of the time swimming was tested, 18% of the time running was tested. So 1 in 5 workouts had running in it. So when I'm prepping an athlete for a sanctional event and I'm looking at their abilities, if their running ability and their swimming ability are both low, I'm not going to spend time on getting their swimming up, because that's not how you're going to qualify and do well. Now, do they need to be able to swim if they go to Wadapalooza? For sure. Like, otherwise you're going to get a last place. But we know at Wadapalooza, there were 3 run events. So that's more points on the table to be better at running. So when I'm looking at it, this is what I mean by actually assessing what's tested so that we can figure out exactly what they need to get better at. Do they need to get better at both swimming and running? For sure. What's most important? Running, obviously. And the other thing too is, in my opinion, running is going to give you more of a physiological adaptation, just because most people are so inefficient at swimming that they're just dog paddling in the water. So they need to get a coach for that and just figure out how to be technically proficient. It's just like trying to build up your Olympic lifts and you're really sloppy. Like, some people just need to get a coach first, clean up the movement, and then we can do strength work, right? So, and this again is not me knocking on like which one you should do. I'm just saying, like, that's a very simple example. Another example to this is, like, we know muscle ups were tested 23 times in 16 sanctionals last year. That means more than once every single sanctional. So if you're not good at muscle ups, but you're working a lot on your barbell cycling because that's just what you think you need to work on, even though that you're good at it, it's like, as a coach, I need to say, no, man, you already have the barbell cycling. You're going to get a top 10 in that. So it doesn't matter if you get an 8th or a 6th. You're going to get a 28th in muscle up. So we need to drive that number up. And that's what we're looking at with all the data.
So basically, almost like one of your bottom lines from that would be, if you suck at something and that's really hindering you, because you've only got obviously so much training currency in any one day, haven't you? Take that and actually focus on the thing that's like sort of dragging you behind the most. So like you just said, sure, if you're insane at barbell cycling, you could argue, well, you don't need to work on that as much. And so the whole bottom line is work on what you shit at, basically, and look at bringing that bottom one up as opposed to bringing your top one even higher. Is that basically the crux of it?
Well, at the beginning, for someone that wants to be an elite level athlete, for sure. Now, when you're in Noah's position, you also need to just be able to win events, right? Like, so like what Max and Noah do is they're working on all the things that he's pretty bad at, which there really aren't that many anymore. But he's also like, you need to win this event, or you need to be in a top, like Mary last year. You have to win that event. And what did he do? He went and won it. And it was an awesome, like, that was the most fun event to watch, not just because I like Noah, but because like he and Matt went head to head for 25 rounds. Yeah. It was freaking awesome. I mean, they need more of that. And of course you got athletes that are complaining, but it's like, well, that's the sport, right? Like, you know, Bukowski's not complaining when it's a run event, but he's complaining when it's pistols. Like, dude, I like Bukowski. I think he's awesome, but it's like, that's just the nature of the game. Like, you're in a sport that's going to have little people movements. Like, that's what it is. And we don't I never said I want to play in the NBA, right? Like, I'm not going to play basketball. I'm 5'9". Like, there's no chance. You know what I mean? So it's like the sport self-selects. But outside of that, so I guess to answer your question is, yes, that's the start, right? Like, you need to get better at the things you're still good at. But I guess the bigger thing is, if there are multiple things that you're bad at, the way that I assess it is, you can't get better at all of those things at once. So then what are the most important things? So again, if we went back to that swimming and running example, which is just, I say this because it's super easy. If we know that in a qualifier, swimming's not going to come out, but we know that maybe running will start coming out, like a shuttle run in a qualifier, you gotta be better at that if you want to qualify for a sanction. So we would drive this side up first, and then in the off season or in prep for a sanctional that has swimming, that's when we'd start doing swimming work. You just got to kind of pick your poison, so to speak, because there's only, like you said, only so many things that you can get better at a time.
So like, to use Josh as an example, like, say he's training for the Open, there's no point in him doing much running because he sucks at rowing. And
for sure.
Hey.
That's for sure. I haven't seen your rowing metrics, but I believe Phil if he says
it. Trust me, it's the one thing that I beat him at. So.
The thing is, if you used to film me rowing, it looks amazing and like pristine, but it just don't ever look at the screen.
Hey, that's all that matters if you look good, right?
Exactly. See?
It looks good until you see him pulling 900 calories an hour.
You know what's funny is when Travis is rowing, it looks just awful. Like, he's got a bit back and his arms are bent the whole time, but he's rowing at 1,800 calories for a long workout. I'm like, how does he do it?
It's insane. But yeah, no, I think that's a really good take home, and it's probably not a way the majority of people look at the sport. Like, I think in the UK, the tendency is to break everything down and work on individual aspects, but then like that you're still working on everything at once, as opposed to sort of like, okay, I'm going to work on this one thing a little bit more because that's what's tested more often. And it's probably just a different way of prioritizing to get better at things, isn't it? I think that's I think that's pretty cool.
And I think in the past, you probably could do that, right? Like, this is one of the things that we've talked about a lot on some of the things that we've put out in our media too, is, 10 years ago, you could just throw stuff together, or you could just basically do Metcons all the time. You're strong enough, you can get better. The whole CrossFit methodology works to a point, right? Like, I love it. There's a reason I still do it. But if you want to be a high level athlete, or if you want to be a performer in whatever you are trying to do, you do have to get down to, what I call like the nitty gritty, the very specifics of what you need to be able to focus on, figure out where your greatest limitations are and drive those numbers up. And so like with the Open, that's a perfect example. Running to me is one of the best things to do, just because it's like, I think it has the most adaptation currency compared to like all the other things that we do, right? As long as your knees and ankle, you can handle the mechanical stress. But in the Open, there's not going to be running, right? Or at least we don't think so. Like, I still touch it because you never know what's going to happen. But we do know that rowing will come out. So leading into the Open, the things that are most common, what's been tested most, right? It's chest to bars, toes to bar, thrusters, burpees. Those are the 4 things that people need to work on for sure the most, because it's every single year. And then underneath that is going to be, if you want to really separate yourself and qualify for something, it's going to be your muscle ups, both bar and ring now, because they've both been tested a ton. Your power clean or power snatch variations. Power snatch has been almost every single year. And then your rowing and some of those other kind of less commonly tested, but they've all been tested more than 6 times over the last 10 years. So when we look at that, I can tell you exactly how many toes to bar on average have been tested, the best number in the sport, the top 5,000, top 10,000, top 15,000, how many average per minute, how many average per second you need to be able to do. Like we were talking, and you mentioned earlier, 2.2 seconds per rep of burpees. We know that because we've compiled all this data from the best in the world. But I also know what someone that's 1,000th in the world needs to be. They need to be at 3.1 seconds, and someone at 10,000. And so when I'm looking at somebody, it doesn't have to be a high level performer. If someone says, I want to go from 10,000th place to 5,000, I can still look at my data and say, all right, his burpee speed is a little bit too slow. So we're going to do some of the things that you're starting to do, some rowing and burpee EMOMs and stuff like that to work on the turnover of those kind of things. And it's just a great cardiovascular performance piece too.
He loves them, Brannen. He loves them.
I've been doing it too, because I've given it to like probably 15 athletes in different variations, and it is brutal. It is absolutely
What he does love though, what he keeps telling me is heavy wall balls. honest to God, I can't tell you how happy he is when he's doing them. So more of them, definitely.
You know what? It was the week that you programmed heavy wall balls like twice or something. I think it was twice. And it come out in the throwdown, and I was just like, "Oh, you joking?" I was like,
trying to prep you, man.
I was like, "Oh, fuck." But
so that's actually quite cool, actually. So obviously, you guys work really close with each other. Obviously, I get to see Phil's training from obviously his side of it when he's doing it and stuff. And obviously, I've been training with Phil over the last 5 or 6 years now. So based on like what Phil wants to achieve and stuff, how do you use that to map out like Phil's specific training? So when I look at Phil's sessions, I wouldn't look at it as like, oh, he's just doing a generic CrossFit Metcon. There's a purpose to every little bit that he's doing, isn't there? So is there particular areas that Phil's got that you think, right, we need to put these fires out first to help him maybe, I don't know, place better in the open or something like that?
Yeah, I would say that almost everything has a purpose. There's definitely things like there'll be Metcons that are thrown in, and Phil can see that. Like, he can go back and look at his programming. I do this for everybody. There's just chaos in some of it, right? Because that's a sport. So like probably once every 10 days for like Phil's program, there'll just be a random CrossFit Metcon that's just put together for things that he needs to get better at. But it's like, hey, this may be something that just comes out in the sport. And so if you're always focused on the limitations, you're not going to get better at the sport, at least not long term, right? But those are also things in the off season that you have to be able to do. So the priorities that Phil has, obviously number one, and Phil, you can attest to this, is just movement patterns in general, cleaning up the shoulder position, cleaning up the hip position. He's had some nagging hip stuff, making sure that his ankles are not pronating when he's squatting, all of those little things that most people hate doing. I'm sure, Phil, you probably can say that you hate it too. Like, I hate it. I mean, I have bad ankle positions, and I've been trying to work on that over and over again. It's for 5 years, I've been working on my movement patterns, and they're still bad, right? Like, it just takes forever. But to be really good at the sport, or also just to be healthy long-term, like, you have to move well, at least well enough to be able to do the things that you want. And so that's priority number one. Priority number two then is the strength, right? And so like when we went through an assessment, it's like, actually, if you got stronger, you wouldn't be that bad. Like, you'd be way more competitive, just because like where you're at right now is just like a strength limitation. Every bottleneck is like
bad. Brilliant.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, says I'm bad in the open. Why is that? It's like, well, you can't get past this bar in the ladder workouts. You can't do muscle ups efficiently. You can't do chest bars efficiently. The gymnastic stuff, it's like that will come together. You have the technical ability, but it's like you don't have the upper body strength to do muscle ups correctly, or you don't have the ability to lift this barbell, which, now you see the last bar is 315 pounds in the open for the squat, clean, and jerk. I mean, that's heavy, but you got to be able to get as close to that as possible. So strength is priority number two. And I think part of that is like, the better your movement gets, the easier it is to do more strength work. The challenge has always been the movement just comes along so slowly that it's just been a constant grind to always fix that. And then obviously now with this whole situation, training has changed a little bit. Everybody, I mean, I have people that still don't have any equipment. Obviously, you guys are lucky enough to grab some equipment and do what you can, but it's still not ideal, right? Like, if you're lifting outside and trying to figure out where a flat piece of ground is and all of that. So now it's just trying to get by, but making sure we're still taking care of some of those limitations.
Yeah, for sure. And like, to be fair, like over the last few weeks, I think because we've had so much more movement based stuff, like any niggles are sort of like shifted and they're not really there anymore. And like my weightlifting numbers and squats are at the matching highest they've been in like 3 or 4 years. So like, I personally, I'm really happy with where my training's going at the minute. You know what I mean? It's like everything's heading in the right direction. And what I know, one thing that Josh wanted to ask about was, obviously we prioritize for specific things, but previous to this, obviously I've always struggled to get specifically better. So like at strength work, so when we talk about front squats, for example, there's a lot of positional stuff that I need to fix. So like rounded back, things like that. And but is there anything in your opinion that is like that you program that is like basically is the reason that I'm getting better, whereas previously on other programs I didn't.
Yeah, I think you haven't even tapped into the strength work yet, just because you've been doing so much of it based on, hey, let's make sure that we're moving perfectly. Or if someone saw your program, like if you posted that and all your members could see it, a lot of it, especially earlier on, was like A, B, C, D of movement, what most people say is junk, but it's like the most important thing for you to do. So you haven't even done like a true strength progression yet. Like you've been doing some strength work. So I think that most of the progress that you've made is just getting better at your positions, like being able to get on your hands and have a more stacked position with your shoulders. It's so much better. Being able to kip on a bar and like actually open up and get into like a full arch position. Those are the little things that now are starting to come together. And as soon as you start opening up those positions, I think if you went through like a full 12 or 16-week strength block, then all of a sudden now it's like a game changer. But with the whole, and that's what we talked about before all the COVID stuff, right? Like that was the transition into the summertime. And then obviously at the end of July, it was going to move into open prep. So like now you're strong enough, whatever that's going to be, wherever we can get you to, and then do open prep work. So I don't think that there's any special recipe. I think the big thing is, again, everyone's different, looking at the limitations that they have. And so for you, it was like making sure that your hips are open enough, because one of the things is you were missing hip internal rotation. So your femur wasn't internally rotating correctly in the acetabulum. And that was causing some issues with being able to hit depth without having deviation in your spine. And that's where a lot of the rounding comes. And then obviously the shoulder position, like, can you stack in this position correctly? And if you can't, then most likely your front rack position is going to be down like this and rolled forward. So those are the things that we've been working on.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Excellent. I think that, like, and again, like for anybody listening and wanting to, so if anybody wants to see some of my programming and see the sort of things that we've been doing, I can by all means pass it on so you can see, like, because something we always preach to our members is like, he's like, move better. Do you know what I mean? Focus on doing it right before you move on to trying to go faster or go heavier. And like we have time in between classes for people to just focus on stuff like just movement. Like you don't have to do another Metcon in that half hour. You know what I mean? I'm like,
right.
You can do, like, we'll give you some movement work. You can do whatever you need to. But obviously people want to snatch, clean and jerk and do muscle ups.
Yeah. And I totally get that, because I've been there and I still do that. Like sometimes it's like, well, I probably should do some movement work right now, but Max and Mike are about to go and do this other piece. It's like, yeah, they're talking trash. Like I want to throw down with them. So I get that. Like, man, if you saw the trash talk, if you guys can come on site sometime, it's a blast. Right. But at the same time, it's like, you got to have some self-discipline and say, no, I know I need to get these things taken care of. And I always say this, and I know you've heard me kind of ramble on this before, but like the best in the sport are all, again, really close as far as like the physiological markers. And some of that may not be true. Like some tests may be way different, but for the most part, if we took all the averages of the top 10 guys, everybody's pretty close. So then where is the separator? So one of those is what we talked about earlier, like that psychological separator. Like Fraser is just a killer. And I mean that in the best way possible. Like he's out there to win and he's willing to hurt. But what else? Like what else is there? And the same thing with Froning. A lot of that is just like movement economy. Like they're using less effort per rep. If they're doing wall balls, they found a way to squat that's using less effort than a lot of these other guys. And I don't mean this as a knock to him, but if you guys have seen Travis Williams ever do like any kind of like thrusters, anything like that, he's a games guy too. He's freaking tough, man. Like that dude like can just grind, but his movement patterns are so bad. So I would bet that his, if all things were equal, he'd probably be just as fit as those guys. But he loses by 5, 10, 15 reps over the course of a 5-minute workout. Why is that? A lot of that is just because he's having to brace really hard. He can hardly hit his depth because his hips are super tight. He's got really bad front rack position. So all of these things are working against him. Whereas like Fraser or Anoa, they just squat so purely that it's like up and down, up and down, up and down. Another example would be Travis Mayer, watching him do double unders. And if you guys haven't seen him, just go on YouTube and watch. Like he'll do 500 unbroken double unders and he'll walk away and he's not even breathing hard. It's just the elastic rebound is so efficient. I do 20 double unders and I'm like out of breath, man. Like it's insane how efficient he is at them. But that's what I mean by like movement economy in the sport. And so like if you want to actually get better with a little, like no extra work as far as CrossFit goes, just learn how to move a little bit better and then everything becomes easier.
I love that though. I really love that because you look at sort of, okay, I want to get better. Doing sets of squats sucks. Yeah, it hurts. Doing rowing intervals sucks even more so. But basically what would you say in there is you can get so much better in your sport and at CrossFit just by moving better. And again, it's not, you wouldn't say like maybe mobility work or movement drills are overly painful, are they? You know what I mean? They're not miserable. Yes, they're a bit, mundane and repetitive.
Yeah. If I was to show you,
get better. So it's like, well, why not do it?
Yeah, if I was to show people my movement work, like it's just a lot. It's not like like the hip.
Those barbell Cossack things that you're doing at the minute, they're brilliant.
Yeah, like they're really.
No, you don't like them. But
yeah.
They're hard. They are hard.
You know what? The first time I did them without watching the video that he'd sent me. And I had the barbell over my head. I'm like, what the fuck is I was like, so I goes back inside my house and I'm like pulling up the video. I'm like, he surely can't be serious with this. and then I look back and I was like, yeah, that makes loads more sense.
Always watch the video.
But yeah, like you say, I could show you a movement piece. And some days there's one day a week at the minute where I'm doing like 2 a day. And I always feel great after that day. Like, I think it's always quite low impact to do a bit of movement work with it. And like, I feel great after that day. The next day when I do like 45 minutes of gymnastics, that's not so much fun. But the day before was good. But yeah, no, definitely. Go ahead, sir. Didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, I always feel so much better when I do it. But like, this is where I empathize with everyone else, because then the next day I'll be like, oh man, I feel good from doing that movement work. I'm just going to go do a hard Metcon. I'm like, no, I need to stick to my schedule. So I get it. Like I tell people, all of my athletes all the time, like, no, make sure you follow this. And it's a battle for me too. But I promise you, man, it's like, that is the easy way to get better. Obviously you still got to grind and do the back squats and the rowing intervals and all the stuff Josh was saying. But like, the movement stuff's an easy way to continue to get better.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. I just want to quickly as well, like bring it back to you, because obviously we've been talking a lot about training and coaching and stuff. One quick question as well. I know too, you mentioned about the trash talk on site. I believe Mike McGoldrick's actually scared of training with you at the minute.
He needs to be scared of training with Max. Max beat him last week like 3 times.
Wow. Okay. Because I don't know if you heard it, the most recent podcast where they talk the Corpus Animus podcast, and basically they're talking about burnout in sport, and Mike's basically like, yeah, you just get sick of getting your ass kicked basically, and so I've stopped inviting Brannen to train with me, and it's just.
I actually am having surgery next week or 2 weeks from now, so he's going to be able to beat me quite a bit for the next month or so.
Just for a month or so. Let him have it.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
I feel like
the goal is to be back in a month, in 4 weeks, but we'll see what happens.
I feel like his ego needs it after listening to the last podcast. So just to bring it back to you, you've competed to a pretty high level as well. So you've competed on teams at regionals, and I've even heard Max say about some of your markers on endurance sort of workouts are pretty high and up there towards the elite as well. So is that a natural thing for you, or is that something you've built over a long time? And how
does movement work?
Oh, it wasn't
regionals.
It's definitely not that for me. I came into the sport relatively fit already, just from like so many years of football and doing a lot of endurance stuff. So like when I left, once I got out of college, I was strong just because we did a ton of strength and conditioning stuff for football. And then like before I even got into CrossFit, I started just doing a bunch of endurance stuff just because it was easy for me. Trying to build the gym and everything else was like, 15-hour days. So like I was exhausted. I didn't want to do any strength work. So I would like wake up every morning, do some running, some rowing, some biking, and just did that for like a year straight. And that was kind of like a nice base builder for me. And then when I got into the sport, I think I had a nice enough base to just kind of learn how to breathe and pace correctly. The my aerobic markers are probably still, top, I don't know, 0.1% of the sport. Like I can keep up with Travis or Will or Noah on anything that's cyclical or anything like that. But I think the difference is like, and this is where it's so hard to be good at the sport. My left ankle and knee I had a pretty bad broken leg situation in my last year playing football, where someone tackled me, snapped my leg in half, and like there's some pins in there and it just still doesn't move. And so because it's so rigid and tense, like if I do 100 squats in a workout, my knee just blows up and like I am just like wrecked for like 3 or 4 days. And so like I can train that once a week and then like still get a little bit better, but like still just not as fast as them. Whereas Noah can do 100 squats every single day and he doesn't even think about it. Like the resiliency for those guys is so much higher, and that's why they're just so much better than a guy like me that maybe like, yeah, I got the cardiovascular endurance or like the nice aerobic base, whatever you want to call it. It's like, that's great for where I want to be, because like as a coach, I'm not trying to compete, but I want to be able to have fun with my athletes. Like, Phil, if you came into town, like I'm going to challenge you to a workout. You know what I mean? Like I want to be able to do that and like talk some trash, but at the same time, what's that?
I'm in right now. Like,
come on, man.
I will die trying. That is. Do you know what? I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was during the Open, me and Josh kind of tracked Max's scores for a little bit, and we were just like, no offense to Max, but we took a look and we looked at him online. We're like, well, we can have this dude, and then he basically whipped our asses on every single workout other than like one, and that was Josh who beat him. It wasn't me. Like that dude is like, you would never guess he's so fit. And I know he's.
Here's the thing. Talking about Max, like to get it off me because I feel uncomfortable talking about me, but he so no lie, 4 years ago he was probably in the worst shape of his life just because he was grinding away at the business, and he'd be fine with me saying this. Like, I mean, he was probably 40 pounds heavier than he is now. He was just working 12 plus hour days. Like he had a full load of clients. He was trying to run the business. He's trying to figure out, who do we hire? Like how much more equipment do we need? Obviously there's all kinds of debt, trying to pay off all the equipment. Like it was the growing pains of the business. So he didn't train. Like he was trying to train, but like when you're in that situation, you guys have been through this, and you try to grow a business, there's just days you're like, I'm exhausted. Like I need to go and sleep, or I need to focus on the business. That's where he was at. And like, he couldn't beat anybody in the gym. Literally he would be last place by minutes. And then something happened, he said, like, I got to live up to, I'm telling my athletes to train hard and be healthy and work hard. And it has been so awesome to see the transformation over the last 4 years of like, he has grinded every single day, and in a good way, not just overtraining. Like he takes days off when he needs to, but like he works hard every single day. And now he is like, he beat Travis at a little piece of the throwdown last weekend. That's how fit he has gotten. Now there's still limitations just because he's a big, like he can't do muscle ups as fast or chest to bars, all the gymnastic stuff. But like if it's just a barbell and stuff, that dude is like really fit, and he's gonna crush the Open.
Yeah, I found that out like the hard way, and I was like,
yeah,
he posted his scores as well each time, and I kept like sort of putting them up on Instagram and being like, yeah, I got that.
I got that.
And then I'd get into the workout and be like, nah. He doesn't even know I'm trying to beat him. If he was next to me, we might have a different conversation. I might try him, but no.
We did the quarantine classic a couple weeks ago. He had like 30 or 40 DMs that were like, I can't wait to beat you. Like people he didn't even, has no idea who they are. And I'm like, man, everybody goes after him. It's so funny.
I thought it was just me. I was like, yeah, I'm going to beat it was awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm conscious of the time, and I just want to move it on to some just finish questions, some fun ones to see if to wrap it up. First question, basically, my favorite one, because I like to get new books. Is what's your favorite? What is the book that you would recommend for everyone and anyone? Or you can recommend a film, but it's up to you.
Yeah. So for training, the two books that I usually recommend that are just great, especially for those that are like trying to figure out the process for themselves and like, man, this is really tough, would be How Bad Do You Want It? Which is one of my favorites of all time, just in any genre. That's Matt Fitzgerald wrote that. And then Chop Wood, Carry Water, which is just a really short read, and it's fantastic. I don't know the author's name of that book though.
Yeah, I've heard of that one before. I've never heard of it, but I like it. I think that's the first time we've had a recommendation that neither of us have read.
Currently writing it down.
Yeah. First time.
Both of those are awesome, and they're both really short reads. Like, I know in today's day and age, like, people don't want to sit down and read a 500-page book or a 1,000-page book. Like, I got bookshelves where you guys can't see them. I'm looking at them right now with all these training books, and I used to recommend them. I'm like, man, it's just such a waste of time because no one actually reads. So, like, something easier to read is a lot better.
For sure. Excellent. Okay, so next question. If you could try any other profession other than the one that you do now, what would it be?
Man, does it? I mean, I would probably just try to play a professional sport. Am I a really good athlete? Is this like a completely dream world? Can I play like on the PGA Tour? Can I be a golfer? That would be so awesome to just like go to these nice golf courses and do that.
I like it. Excellent. And this one trips everybody up, and that's basically why I like to ask it. But the next one is, if you could sit down with one person, and you got a 24-hour period to sit down with one person, interview them, learn everything you possibly can from them, who would it be?
Who's still alive?
Nope, can be dead or alive.
Yeah, well, I'll do two. One would be just the one that's still alive would be Warren Buffett, just because I would love to hear how I've been getting in the stock game a little bit, obviously now with everything down here in the U.S. So I would love to kind of hear his thoughts on that. It's just selfish because I try to figure out how to game that a little bit better. And then I actually am reading a book right now by Brad Meltzer, which he's just like a historian here in the United States, and he it's on Abraham Lincoln, and it's on a conspiracy, the first conspiracy to actually kill him back in 1861, which I know you guys don't know U.S. history, I'm sure that much, but really interesting book. And he goes through some of his detailed letters. So I would love to like sit down with him and talk to him. Not Brad Meltzer, but Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, no. Also, do you know what? Like, I think they are the first and most unique answers we've had in 31 episodes, because we like nobody's ever said Abraham Lincoln. Everyone says Michael Jordan at the minute because of the
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
But like, no, like they're really
trash the whole time. I'd start crying. That dude is ruthless, man.
Do you know what? I love watching that. Every time I watch that documentary, I'm just like, this is so brilliant. I keep getting text messages though, people saying to me like, "Oh, you need to watch this documentary." I'm like, why aren't you listening to the podcast? I've told everybody every time it's on to watch. Yeah. Like, yeah. Okay. Awesome. Right, Brannen, that was awesome. Thank you very much for being on today and taking the time to have a chat with us. We do really appreciate it. Before I let everybody go, obviously, please like, subscribe. Oh, wow, that's not how you say that, is it? Like, wow. Hang on, one more go.
Come on, bro. Coach is watching.
We'll edit this out.
No rep.
Please like, subscribe, and share. Give us a 5-star review on iTunes. And again, just the more you guys comment, share, and all the rest of it, the more it gets out there. Today's podcast has been super entertaining. If you've enjoyed this one, we've also got a podcast up with Josh's weightlifting coach. So you definitely want to jump on that and probably see a good contrast there, actually. It'll be very interesting.
Episode 4,
yeah, way back when. So again, guys, thank you very much for being on, and peace.